Hello everyone, I'm recording this video to show you how to export a geometry like this as a shade to IES. I'm going to use a method which is generic enough that you can use for most of your studies or geometries. It's not necessarily the most efficient, but it should work for most of the geometries that you have. So we have a complex geometry here. It's a closed B-wrap or polished surface. If you use the standard way of creating shade, you will see that the Rhino plugin will make like way too many faces from this shade, and Rhino can get pretty heavy. So to manage shades like this, I would use Grasshopper, and this is how you can do it too. So I'll share this script. You can find the link in the bottom of this video where to download it. But this shows the overall process. So the process is, the first step is to bring this geometry to Rhino. So you can do set 1 B-wrap, or if you have multiple, you can do set multiple. Then you select it. It comes to Grasshopper from Rhino. The next step, I decompose the faces. This is important because if you do not decompose the face, usually the mesh that you get will be more complicated, right? So you want to make sure that you break them down so it can give you, you have more control on the faces. I mean, one advantage is if you do all together, it usually tries to create a mesh that's more closed, but you don't need that really for your energy or even daylight simulation. The next step is just create a mesh out of this B-wrap. I'm using the mesh B-wrap component, which is the generic component. And then what I'm going to do, so I'm going to select this, press Ctrl Q so you can see the mesh in Rhino. I'm going to select this and press Ctrl H to hide the geometry in Rhino. You can see all the mesh edges. If you cannot see that, go to display and check preview mesh edges is on. So display in Grasshopper, preview mesh edges is on and off. So you have control on mesh settings. The easiest way to simplify it is to use this component called settings, and it's located here under mesh utilities, and then set planes to true and refine to false. And now when I connect this here, keep an eye for the number of faces. You will see the number of faces will come down to 132 from whatever it was, 455. So this is basically, you try to simplify it because really having all these details is not going to make a difference in your simulation, and it most likely makes the simulation slower because of the number of faces. The next step here is to get all this mesh. This mesh can have triangular faces, and it can have quad faces. So the quad faces with 4 edges may or may not be planar. But for energy simulation, we want to make sure they are planar. That's why here we basically use this triangulate component to make sure all the faces are triangulated. So up to here is the process for simplifying the geometry, right? Getting it from B-wrap, non-planar faces, to a mesh fit all planar faces at this point. Before I go to Ladybug Tools components to create the shade, I want to mention one thing. In Grasshopper, you have another component called simple mesh, and this should basically do both of this, but you don't have as much control. And one thing that can happen is if your geometry is complex, it can create invalid mesh. So I try to make the geometry, complex enough to get this, so you can see why I didn't use this. I mean, this might work for other solutions that are not as complex geometry-wise. Maybe I should type show here so you can see the geometry back again. Okay, now the next step is we get this mesh. We want to export it as a gem file. So the steps here is, first I'm using a honeybee component called HB shade to create the shade. This is a Python script that I had to add, which is something that the Rhino plugin does, but we don't have a component for it in the Grasshopper script. You don't need to really understand what it does. It takes the shades and make them grouped together by adding an ID for the shade group to user data. You can double click and see the code if you like. And then here I'm creating a model that only has this shade, a honeybee model. Why do I do this? Because that's how I can export it as a gem file. This component is a pollination component. So you'll see it's under pollination, export to gem. You connect the model, you name it, and then the folder, and then if you set the boolean to true, it should take a second and it will be exported. Complex shades gem under C pollination demo. So let me go ahead and open this in IES-VE so we can see the geometry. Okay, so now I'm inside IES-VE. I go to File, Import BIM file, and change this to gem format. And you should see this complex shades gem. I open it, and you'll see it here. So I'm not going to press OK, not to load it, because I want to show you a few things. So one thing here is you see this shade is now a local shade, right? It's attached to the building. So if you want to change that in the Rhino script, what we can do is attached here. I think by default, actually by default is set to false. So that was a context or neighbor geometry, right? If you want to change that, you can bring a boolean toggle here and set it to true. Double click and say this is attached. So this is set to true, so it will save it again. And now if I go back to IES and update this, you'll see now this now changed to be an attached shade. It depends on the geometry, if it's next to your building or if it's like a complex shade that is only next to your building but it's not part of the building. So you have control on that. The other thing that you will see after I import it is that, so okay, this imported successfully. Let's just see this for a second. Here we go. That you will see is the name here is named something random. This is because I didn't put the name. If you want to fix that, then you can come back here and there is another input to name the shade object. So let's call it complex shade, and I connect this to the name here. So again, like this is set to true, so it automatically goes through the process and saves a new one. So if I go back here, create a new project, give it a few seconds and go and import the same file. Okay, and now you'll see the name is set to complex shade, the name that you basically picked inside Rhino Grasshopper. Okay, I hope this video helps you to basically manage exporting these geometries with some help from Grasshopper. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please let us know on Pollination Discourse forum. Thank you.